Welcome to Roll for Crit. Today we're getting in the Halloween spirit with our review of Paranormal Detectives from Lucky Duck Games. This is a mystery solving / party game in which a ghost has appeared because someone has been the victim of a tragic death, and it's up to the different detectives with their paranormal skills to try to determine how it happened and why.
Yes, this is a competitive mystery solving game with the ghost trying to give clues, and each player will eventually be able to make guesses, and the ghost wins if one person guesses correctly. Now, if everyone either can't guess correctly or uses up all their guesses, whoever was the closest wins and the ghost loses. So really, the ghost is trying their best to get someone to guess it right, because they win with that player.
Yeah.
Now, the ghost player really won't be doing much talking. They'll get one of these cards. There are about 50 in the base deck, and it'll tell you your story, and they'll answer the main things that people have to guess: the who, the why, the where, the how, and the weapon. You will also be told to set up this little area here, which shows where the injuries are, visible injuries are on the body, what gender you are, and a little blurb such as you find man in a business suit. Something very simple, nothing too descriptive. From there, it will be up to really just the players to take their turns and the ghost just responding.
Yeah, so on a player's turn, they get to ask the ghost one question, and it can be anything they want as long as it is not a yes or no question. But other than that, they can say, who killed you? What was the weapon? It can be as straightforward as they want. And when they ask that question, they're going to play one of their cards, and the cards will determine how the question is answered. So there are a lot of different ways that that can take place, but none of them are going to be a straightforward answer. So for instance, maybe the ghost will use this board to somehow indicate something by the positions of these dials. They might use the spirit board here by placing them to certain words or certain letters to try to get players to guess a word that is the answer to that question. They could use these tarot cards, and again, they have to interpret how those work, which could be a number of different things. Maybe there's one that's a pantomime, like a charades kind of thing. One uses those ropes over there, and you can arrange those in a weird way.
There are some that involve touching the other players, either writing a symbol on their back or using their hand to draw on the card. However, they do have rules if you're not comfortable with that to sort of swap the cards out, so you just stick with the non-physical touching ones.
Yeah, which is a nice thoughtful thing that they did in the game.
We should mention, by the way, this is murder cases, and this is on the more like rated 18. They mentioned that, this isn't like simple deaths. They do have some very creative, weird ones, but just a heads up there.
Yeah, if you're familiar with the game Dark Stories, it's somewhat along those lines. It can be graphic, there's violence, there's bloodshed.
It's the opposite, really. That one's only yes or no. This is the no yes or no.
Right, so again, you go around. Also, each player has their own little note sheet, so you can use this to keep track of what you think the answers to these questions are, as well as whatever other notes you want to write down here.
After they play a clue card, they can then make a guess, in which the ghost will write on his own little board here, as well as on their board, which is secret, how many they got right. Everyone will hear what the person's guess is, but they won't know how many are right. So this way you can mark like, okay, I know this person knows 3 of them, and then if knows the next one got 1 and 1, they're like, okay, they're on the right track. This person is the one I need to focus on maybe a bit more.
It really is a kind of a twofold thing as a detective. It's deciding what's a good question to ask and how to ask it, and also what's a question that hopefully will help me more than everyone else, because only you want to solve it.
That's right. There is a cooperative, by the way, but in that mode, everyone only gets 2 guesses instead of each player.
Right, so you can work together that way.
Now, for the ghost part, he can try to help a little bit. For the first 3 incorrect guesses, he has these own hint cards. So pretty much, there's no question though. So unfortunately, he has to then think, what can I do without them asking something that may prompt? Like spelling out a certain word, which tends to be, at least in my mind, one of the most helpful ones.
Yeah, you can get something concrete from that at least. Yeah, so on both sides, it's really a struggle of trying to get people to interpret what you want, and
yeah, it's not simply the
how
answer,
to interpret.
It's also how to make it correct. I think the obvious example of that is the whisper. You ask the ghost a question and they have to mouth out a word. So not only are you trying to say something, you have to make sure it's something that they think they can read your lips with. And not all of us are very good lip readers or speakers, so.
Yeah, but that is the gist of the game. That's really how it works. And once you've solved the case, it's over. Or if you haven't, then whoever got the closest to solving the case is the winner. I mean, at first glance, I think even in their own press release for this game, they mentioned the game Mysterium. I think it certainly has some of that DNA in it. But I was impressed after playing it with how different it really feels. And at first I was perplexed by it.
That's because I think at first you think Ghost with other players, okay, Mysterium. But I think the truth is it's a more related board game was Dark Stories.
Right.
It's a weird mystery that you're all asking questions to sort of put the pieces together. The difference obviously isn't just you're focusing on what information you can gather. It's really how can I gather the right information from this card? Because obviously the pantomime, for example, maybe worked better if who's the murderer, or what was your reaction, or what were you doing before your death, not what killed you.
Right, but it could be entirely group dependent too, because maybe your group finds certain questions work better than others.
And case dependent. I think there's definitely certain cases that make certain questions easier or harder. There's definitely one case in particular that we were and of course it was our first game too. We still look back and we think it's the hardest one, but it was definitely, I think, a brain burner.
Yeah, well, I think especially when you first start out, it's coming up with non-yes or no questions is a challenge, and it really requires you to make your brain think in a different way than you are used to, especially for the detectives. The Ghost has some challenges too, but I found as a detective it was really hard at first to even know what to ask.
No, I was the Ghost first, and I think because of that, it's not just coming up with the right yes no. And I think that was the problem also with the first case being
that was
hardest.
my problem.
No, but I think there's the next hurdle which made it more difficult was when you finally came up with one, you have to really match it with the card that works best with it.
Right.
Which it's a good and bad thing, because sometimes you can just be really annoyed because you never can get that piece of information out really well, because maybe it doesn't work with all the questions. It's very more hypothetical, kind of weird.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that can be really clever when you feel like I remember when you were the Ghost, someone asked what were you doing with the pantomime, or what was your job, and you did it very well. I was about to actually say it, but I'm like, I don't want to spoil it just yet.
No spoilers. I think, again, it comes down to a lot of it is who you're playing with and how, because sometimes someone might luck into just the perfect, the perfect first question that leads everyone down a track, but someone might ask a question, or the Ghost might do it in a way that makes people think something else, and then there could be something totally different. There was almost an aspect, too, I felt like, of a game of telephone, where there were some times where I would make a guess and someone else would be like, okay, nothing you said is what I was thinking at all, which was really funny because you can interpret things in totally different ways, which adds to a lot of the fun and the chaos of it. Definitely on the goofier side of games, I think, as long as you're
but goofy.
Yeah, dark but goofy. But if you're willing to get into it, the stuff of doing little pantomimes or making strange noises or pointing at things, it has a party game feel, but more of I think there's still a game there relative to this genre, like the kinds of the Mysteriums, the Dark Stories. Trying to think, I know there's other games in this sort of family of guessing games, maybe Werewords, kind of something like that.
3 Clues?
Oh, right, Three Secrets. Yeah, things like that. I think it has enough meat on it that if you're a gamer, you'll get into it. But you definitely need to be open to the more creative side of your brain.
Right. Well, I think that's where the gaming part comes from. It's the questions. It's how do I really ask these weird questions, which you think drawing a symbol on the back is going to be really hard with. So you want to maybe ask something in a weird way, or for example, someone asked a question where it wasn't relevant. In case you might do an X, so they know. You have to really think, how do I ask this that can portray the most information? And as the Ghost, how can I answer this in a way that portrays information? It might not. Sometimes a certain word works well, but because of the grouping of the letters, it's going to be hard to figure out. But if you can come up with either, because you don't have to use all 5. If I come up with a 4-letter word, they know it's only 4 letters.
Right.
5 might be longer, or if it has a really weird letter combination, uses a lot of vowels, it's going to be there's only one word I could possibly think of.
Yeah, there's a lot of that on both
That's
sides.
where I think the really more fun intellectual part from this comes from, is just how can I get this information across, especially as the Ghost, since you win if anyone wins.
Yeah. Crits and misses for Paranormal Detectives. Crits. On the surface, the game's formula will be familiar to you if you've played other games of the same genre, but it does a lot of things to innovate within that genre, adding some really strange ways to interact with other players. Based on those innovations, players are required to do some really creative outside-the-box thinking. Whether you're a detective or a ghost, you can't just simply ask or answer in straightforward ways. You have to really stretch your brain.
Certain questions are better for certain desired answers, so you really want to make sure as the detective that your question matches very well with the card you play. And as the ghost, of course, you can't simply just answer. You have to make sure your answer works well in a way that would transmit easily to the other players. Looks like the Ouija board is spelling out misses. The difficulty of the cases can vary vastly, especially when you take into account different player groups. This can be an issue if you're the ghost because you can't get the players on the right track. Or if you are the player, since this is competitive, if it's a much more difficult case, it can really stink if you need that one more piece of information, but by asking it, the next player is really going to be the one who solves it.
Because the game requires you to use your brain in some very different and unique ways, it takes some getting used to. You have to definitely get yourself accustomed to the style and the feel of it before it really sinks in.
Unlike games like Spyfall or Dark Stories, you can't simply ask a question, get an answer. You have to come up with non-yes or no questions, and not only that, try to match them well with these cards, which can be really weird. This can be hard, especially during your first playthrough and trying to come up with the right questions to even get any kind of information.
Certainly for me, it was a challenge at first to understand how to ask questions and how they would be answered. Again, it takes some getting used to have your brain wrapped around it.
We've played a lot of these mystery solving cases. We tend to enjoy them. And this is not our first one that's competitive. I think this would be our third, if you take Sherlock Holmes one as well as the detective, City of Angels.
Mm-hmm. Watson and Holmes, that's the one you're thinking of? Yeah.
So I think that we've seen enough of these. And I do like this one because I think it's a little bit lighter than those in terms of just being more on the party side.
The mystery is much simpler. Mm-hmm. There's not nearly as much stuff.
Yeah, no, the Sherlock Holmes one can be really weird and complicated in some of the stuff that happens. And you only get one guess in that one. I think that's where both detective works well, where they have either the chisel in that case, when this has the ghost. But in this one, unlike the LA, the ghost is working with everyone. He's not trying to hinder them, which can be, I think, a bit more helpful, especially if you're more on the newer side. Even though it has sort of the much more darker murdery scene, it still, as you said, felt a little bit lighter. And once you get like one or two cases under your belt, you know the kind of questions to ask, and you can be a bit more confident in how to maybe rearrange those tarot cards or spell out the right words.
Yeah, once I pulled it off, and once you like understand what a case is, even more so if it's really confusing at first, it's really satisfying to finally make those connections in your brain and go, oh, that's what that thing meant from 10 minutes ago that I had no idea what he was trying to do.
Right. And once again, also like Detective City of Angels, this allows for a cooperative mode and 1v1 mode, which we did. Well, not 1v1, it's more of a cooperative with two players, with one the ghost, one the detective, which we also did. And we thought those worked just as fine. Just as well, just as fine. It's just you have to be a bit more careful with your guesses, but because you're not really also trying to hide as much information, you're not worried too much about that on that front. And even in the competitive, it just felt nice when you solved something.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say if you are a fan of all the games, any of the games that we talked about today, certainly Mysterium, Spyfall is another good one that you brought up, and you like kind of a spookier theme and you think your group will be okay with something a little outside the box, definitely give this one a shot. It surprised me in how weird it was and how innovative I felt it was. It does a lot of cool, weird things with different aspects.
Well, because it's more competitive and there's more of a back and forth with the ghost, that's why I'm really happy, because at first I'm like, okay, is this Mysterium? Is it really just going to be like, it's okay, but Mysterium's better? No, it definitely is not. It should not be.
Very different.
Yeah, very different. Don't, like, outside of there's a ghost and a people, I don't think it's very different. I mean, I think it's very different. And I don't think they should be considered which one you should get. I think, like we said, it's much more comparable to something like the Sherlock Holmes or the Dark Stories.
Yeah, I agree. So let us know what you think if you've had a chance to play Paranormal Detectives. It should be coming out shortly. Post in the comments section down below, or if you have any other questions or ideas about the game, suggestions for the future, whatever you want to say it down there in the comments.
Oh, we actually forgot to mention, because we got this a little early, but we should bring up, there is going to be an app that, from what we can tell, should have other stories. Unfortunately, it's not there, so we can't really tell you what's in there, if it adds maybe spooky sound effects and stuff, which I would love to see them add.
Yeah, so that's something to look out for too, definitely. Look through their website, see when that stuff pops up. Until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was a Roll for Crit review.
Here's an idea. Support our Patreon or like and subscribe to this channel for more.
Subscribing gives you a +2 to your charisma stat.